Teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you did it. You hit the play button, so you know what's fun. You know what's about to go down. All right. Whatever the challenge, whatever the obstacle, whatever maybe you may feel like is getting in your way, we are here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. Today, I have Ms. Ral West, the founder of Livin a Dream, who is going to give us a master's class. You guys heard me correctly. Going to give us a master's class, a tutorial on how to actually systematize your business so you're no longer working in the business so much, and you're more so working on the business, and you're allowing the things, the what the business was meant to do in the first place. You're allowing that to kind of delegate to the right people and delegate to a system and all that kind of stuff. So all that being said, Ral West, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Aswan. I appreciate being here.
Yes, and I will tell you now, you are the first one to have joined the Move Swiftly podcast from Alaska. So you're breaking some barriers today, babe. This show has been going on for 5 years now, and you're officially the first one to have joining us from Alaska. So that is a great accomplishment, and it's kind of a rewarding feeling for me as well. So great to have you.
That's wonderful.
Now, I mean, I know there's a lot of things that we can get into, and we have a lot of ground to cover in regards to how you were able to build your business and how, you able to create something in which you're teaching people how to systematize. But I think the best way to start off is just give us a little bit about your background, a little bit how you grew up and stuff like that, some of the lessons that you learned, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, all right. Well, I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and I was born into an entrepreneurial family. My father had a business that was one of the very first tour companies in Alaska. So they
Hmm.
call him Mr. Alaska because they credit him for sort of founding the tourism industry in Alaska.
Yes.
And so obviously business was in my blood from the very beginning, and Alaska was in my blood.
Mhm.
So in my mid-20s, I moved to Ketchikan, Alaska. I had a job offer to be a director of marketing for a small tour company there.
Mhm.
And I hemmed and hawed, but finally accepted the offer. And then after about a year there, I felt like, I know better how to run this business. And so I thought, maybe I should just go out on my own. So
Right.
I moved further north to Anchorage, Alaska,
Mhm.
in about 1981 and started a small business doing marketing consulting in tourism, of course.
Yeah.
And it was there that I met my husband.
Mhm.
And together we started a business. He actually got the idea from it from stuff that I was doing, because
Mhm.
he was real estate and had been in construction too.
Right.
And he
I
loved
can
going
see
to
where that
Hawaii.
connects, though. I can see where that connects as a
Yeah.
someone that's into tours and stuff like that. You kind of have to ask those questions about what you're selling or what you're providing for your clients in the real estate world and the touring landscape. I do actually see where there's a great connection there, business wise.
Yeah. I think mostly he was motivated by getting free trips to Hawaii.
Hey, ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that either.
So some of my earliest clients were hotel companies, rental car companies, and Inter
Mhm.
Island Air in Hawaii, and I was representing them to the people of Alaska,
Right.
being a sales rep for them. And so I was trundling off to Hawaii
Mhm.
a few times a year, and he's like, I need to get in on this somehow.
Yes, 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 yes.
So he started representing Alaskans who own condos in Hawaii, and there are many, because Hawaii is like the favorite sun, sand, and sea destination for Alaskans.
Yeah.
And and I kept saying, well, that's not exactly how you do it. I mean, in the travel business, isn't that?
Mhm.
So we developed, a friendship and so on. And, less than a year later, we were married.
And
We've been,
and not to cut you off, but I really think it's really important that I pause you there so people understand that's the way it should be. You should nowadays, it's so important that you develop friendship with people, professional relationships with people, so you don't go off and turn things into a physical thing too quick. Like I love the fact that you mentioned that because too often do we see the opposite, where we see people rushing into certain things, and you clearly again have the friendship, you have you have that respect for one another, where you're starting to see each other as partners. So that's great that you said. It's refreshing, to be honest with you, to hear you say that in 2020.
Yeah. And it's probably why after 41 years, we kind of still like each other. So
Yes.
it's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is too, and I don't want it to get brushed over what you had actually said, because I grew up like you. My father had his own business as well. And I'm curious now that when as you've grown in the business, what do you attribute you maybe seeing your father having done the work he's done? How do you think that kind of affected you when you were during these times where you could have stayed, working 9 to 5 and then decide, I'm going to go jump into my own entrepreneur vision? How much do you attribute that to maybe seeing what your father did?
Yes, well, yeah, he was a very independent sort and just did exactly what he wanted to do. It wasn't always right, but
Right.
he
Yeah,
just
well, I
his
know for a fact that as a man who's raised by a similar father,
yeah,
I attest to you. Amen on that.
yeah, his favorite song was "My Way" by Frank
My way.
Sinatra.
Yep.
No.
Yep. 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 Exactly. I say less. I know
So,
exactly where you go with that one.
and I think that that kind of got into my system about just being able to call the shots myself.
Yes.
And that's where I got frustrated working with other people, is that they didn't listen to me and I knew better, So,
I
um,
understood.
but going into business for yourself is very risky and scary and challenging. And I didn't really know what I was doing.
Mhm.
So, but that didn't really stop me. I just figured, well, I'm capable of learning. So I will just jump in and I will figure it out. And I did. And then, my husband started this business with the condos in Hawaii, and it grew. He took some of my advice and
Mhm.
he started adding rental car and hotel packages, putting together. And then the big thing is that we needed to provide the air service to get people from Alaska to Hawaii, and the scheduled carriers that were in this market pulled out. And so we were left with like, how do we sell packages in Hawaii if we can't get our people to Hawaii?
Oh
And
man.
if you didn't have direct flights from Anchorage to Honolulu, let's say, you had to go through Seattle, and it was just a
Wow.
lot cumbersome.
Hmm.
So he found a carrier that had a plane that had enough hours
Yeah.
idle on that plane so that they could do what's called a turn and go from Honolulu to Anchorage and back to Honolulu
Mhm.
during the off time when it
Wow.
wasn't being used for something else. And so we
Hmm.
chartered that plane. And that was, a huge risk, a
Yeah.
huge financial obligation.
Because it's a
And
chartered flight at this point, so not the price has to go up for you guys.
well, yeah,
Mhm.
because the price of flying that plane was the whole plane. We
Right.
couldn't just buy however many seats we sold. We had to buy all the seats.
Oh my, yeah, you
And
have to. Oh my God. Whoa. Now it's connecting now. Wow. Yes.
yeah,
That is.
so it was big. And there was one time during this, because there were various carriers and we just kept trying to find another plane and another plane. And
Mhm.
excuse me, he at one point had to put up a letter of credit, and we didn't have the net worth to back that letter of credit.
Mhm.
And my father's business was busy buying cruise ships, so he was kind of all tied up. And
Mhm.
so his mother, who was a school teacher, put up her retirement account as
Wow.
collateral for that letter of credit. And then it was like, oh my God, we had better do this right, because we are not losing her retirement
Yeah.
piggy bank. So my husband's a fantastic salesperson, and he hit the streets and just, pounded the pavement and made sure that every seat was sold. And he did. He did it.
Uh,
And it was successful. And then the company grew and grew and grew. And in those early years, and by the way, by that time, I had stopped running my own business and said, okay, this financial obligation, I think this deserves my entire attention. So I was like full time working with him in what was called Hawaiian vacations.
mhm.
And um, we were the mom and pop running this organization and doing everything. I mean, my husband was changing light bulbs and sweeping the sidewalk in front of the building and so on and so forth. I mean, we just did it all. And we had a young daughter, and we didn't have time. She had to come to the office to do her homework because we weren't going home. It was just not a real healthy lifestyle for us. And we realized that, something needed to change.
Mhm.
Um, and it was about that time that we were in Kona in Hawaii at the same time as Robert Kiyosaki.
Mhm.
And he had been a friend and a teacher and mentor to us for several years. We started studying with him in
Mhm.
Anchorage in the late 80s. And we had lunch with him, just the three of us down by the pool at his hotel.
Right.
And he said,
Did he
he
already write Rich Dad Poor Dad at that point, or
no,
this was
um, no, I think that was just starting at that point. He had it in mind, but I don't think he had written it quite yet.
yes.
Um, and he also he created the game
I have
Cash.
yeah, I have well, oh yeah, I have that game. That yeah, I have that.
Yeah, and we were playing the beta of that game. He says, try this out, and that was a lot of
Okay, you
fun.
guys are beta testers for the cash flow quadrant. Was that
The,
that's
the cash flow game.
the cash
Yeah,
flow game, right, right.
and we played it
That
with our
wasn't before you
daughter.
made the quadrant though, right?
The cash flow quadrant was the book that came later.
That was book, right, right.
Yeah, yeah. And if you haven't read any of these books, you
You have
gotta.
it's
It's,
so important.
just
Well, before we get, because like I was telling you before we start recording, we could probably do a whole episode on Robert Kiyosaki. I want to make sure we don't brush over something that you previously, shout out to moms, shout out to the parents, shout out especially mom that put up her retirement just to get this business started. I cannot let that get overstated or brushed over because as a person that teaches now at a startup school and I see the sacrifice that parents make and actually every Sunday Ral, I do a live stream with a lady named Kimberly and we actually just talked about balancing parenting and finding a career and a job and how difficult it can get. I got to give a genuine shout out to the mother who would see her son who's really trying, really putting like really doing it the right way. You got married, you're being productive, you're not being someone that's a negative person towards society, being productive and for her to put up the retirement and for the son to go out and perform and respond, I think that deserves a hand clap. And that's something that I'm making sure I'm re-emphasizing for you listeners because I know that decision could be very tricky. I know that decision could be challenging when you have the option of maybe just taking the check and doing something you don't necessarily love or really going for it, going for your goals, going for your dreams. And I say that too because I want to ask, this was probably before the time that social media and the internet kept us so connected. So how were you guys able to go out and
absolutely.
get the sales? Like how were you just going door to door? Were you, how walk us through a little bit about what the sales process was like and how you guys were able to get these leads and get those things sold to really, make it something happen.
Well, this was the day and age when people went to travel agents to book
Ah,
their.
man, I'm telling you, there was a time for that.
There was a time. In fact, I was a travel agent at one
Yeah,
point. So,
right.
so he would physically go into every travel agency in Anchorage. He would travel to Fairbanks. He'd go, to wherever there was a travel agency
Yeah.
and talk about the product and get them to support us.
Hmm.
And we were not computerized. We had an in-house computer that
Yeah.
took care of the reservations, but it was only in-house. It was not connected to anyone.
Mhm.
So the reservations were taken over the phone by a reservation agent saying hello and yes, when would you like to go and so forth. And then they type it, into our own computer system. And that's how it worked. And we had paper, tickets that we would have to send to them and so forth. It was not electronic in any way like it is now.
Right.
Um, but yeah, he developed the relationships with all the travel agents, and we did advertising, a
Right.
lot of radio and television and print advertising,
Right.
and that's something that's not necessarily done that much these days.
No.
So this meeting with Robert Kiyosaki was in about 1994, and I guess I should backtrack a little bit and say, when you talked about just going for it instead of just going back and finding a job.
Yeah.
Well, about 1990, 91 was when we were struggling with, we don't have the air service. And we seriously sat down over lunch one day and said, should we just close the doors?
Right.
Should we just call it quits? Because we don't owe anybody any money. We could just close the doors and be done.
Hmm.
And we did a lot of soul searching and decided that no, the people of Alaska really need this service. They
Right.
want to be able to get out of, the cold and the dark in the winter. And where we live in Alaska now, it's not that cold and not that dark because we're very far south from Anchorage. But Anchorage could be a little brutal in the
Right.
winter, and they needed Hawaii.
Right.
So we thought we were doing a public service by offering this air
Yeah,
service.
exactly.
So by the time this lunch with Robert Kiyosaki happened in 1994, we were kind of well on our way. We had a couple of 2, 3 years of charter air service under our belts, and he could see that we were making it. And he says, "Okay, you guys need to go get these two books."
Hmm.
And he's one of them is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and it's a capital E dash MYTH. And
Yes.
the other one is The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack.
Right.
And we were flying to Honolulu that afternoon. We stopped at the Ala Moana Shopping Center, went to the bookstore, picked up those two books, and started reading them
Hmm.
right away. Well, by the time we got back to Anchorage a few days later, we had devoured those books.
Hmm.
And we said, all right, this is what we need to do. These
Yes.
books have the formula for us.
Yes.
And that's when we really, in earnest, started developing the systems.
Hmm.
And I should say that we already had systems, of course, but those books just really gave us the kick in the butt
Hmm.
to get more focused on developing the systems and more than that, to develop the culture of the company around systems, to build the teams and empower teams. And we just totally revolutionized the way our company operated.
Right.
And in about 5 years, we were able to move from being the mom and pop with our hands in everything every day to turning the management over to a chief operating officer and a chief financial officer.
Hmm.
And we walked away and bought a second home on Maui and said, see ya.
See ya.
Although not entirely, though, because part of the systems was developing the metrics. We had a lot of data. We
Yes.
had reports that came out daily and weekly and monthly. So we knew exactly how the company was doing, whether we were there or not. And then, of course, by that time, it was the late 90s, and we were fully, online
Hmm.
with the
Right.
internet and all that. And it was also um, just right after we hired the COO and the CFO that we decided to take the plunge and create an automated reservation system. Now,
Right.
this was, again, a beta test. This company hadn't done one of these before, and we said, we don't want to be the beta, but we were.
Right.
And so we worked with them to create an online reservation system so that the individuals and the travel agents could book all the flights and rental cars and hotels and everything online, whether our doors were open or not, whether we
Right.
had any reservation staff on duty or not.
Right.
So that was a huge investment, time and money, and it totally just, you know, skyrocketed the business
Hmm.
in terms of what we were able to do. So in just a few short years, we were doing 8 digits in annual revenue and just humming right along. And we developed an outside board of directors, some really, really top people in the Alaska business industry that agreed to work with us and advise us in exchange for free trips to Hawaii and so forth.
Yes.
And
Oh,
they were incredibly, excuse me, instrumental in helping us mold this company and grow it. And we got to the point where it was time to look for the door because we heard that Alaska Airlines was going to be coming into the Hawaii market. And we knew it was only a matter of time before they would, decide to run from Anchorage to Hawaii.
yes.
And we kind of had a feeling that their pockets were deeper than ours.
Yeah.
And the way that you win a market is that you lower the fares. And so we could fight it out. We had duked it out with Northwest Airlines and with Hawaiian, and we had won. But Alaska was, a different story.
Right.
So we hired an investment banker and made a pitch to Alaska Airlines that they should buy us
Mhm.
instead of trying to win the market, which would be expensive for both of us.
Right.
Just buy us. So they did.
Now, walk us through a little bit about what you picked up from those books, because when you mentioned Robert
Mm.
Kiyosaki, he's widely, and at least from my perspective, and a lot of people would agree with this, he's widely known for teaching the difference between assets and liabilities and systematizing this way of making sure the money is going into your assets and not liabilities, to where everything that you put money in, you're starting to see where you're getting ROI, you're seeing a return on investment, whether you buy a house. And he's big in the real estate world because that's where he does a lot of his work. So
Right.
as you are developing and you're growing your business and you're starting to think of the strategies of maybe how to sell, maybe how to work better, what was it about the two books that you actually picked up that you were able to start to really align with your business to the point where I would say it's a success, because you were able to sell. You were able to sell knowing that a competitor was coming in and knowing, look, Hubby, we done been through a lot. Let's make sure we're being smart about this. What would you
Yeah.
say you were like learned through those two books that allowed you guys to think the way you think, were able to think the way you're thinking?
Great questions. So the E-Myth was all about systematizing your business
Mhm.
and duplicating yourself as the owner operator. And it was much about don't be the operator of your business, be the owner of your business. So as you said at the beginning, work on your business, don't work in it.
Mhm.
And it was all about, putting hats on each job function and making sure that everybody, that if you're the only person, then you're wearing all the hats, but make sure that you're actually, doing all the jobs that you need to be doing,
Right.
and develop the systems, create repeatable, documented procedures and processes
Mhm.
so that when you're ready to hire somebody, you can easily bring them in and say, okay, here, this is exactly what you need to do.
Mhm.
This is the process. This is the job description. This is the A, B, C, D, and E of how this particular task is done. But
Yeah.
if you don't lay that foundation, you bring somebody in, which actually we had done. I mean, I remember a time when we brought an employee in and said, "There's the phone, answer it, take a booking," and that was her training. I mean, you know, she
Right.
ended up staying with us for over 20 years, but I can't imagine why, because
Uh-huh.
that was it was horrible.
Mhm.
Um, but we got to the point where we were developing a 2-week training course,
Mhm.
and we would hire a cohort of reservations agents, and we would have like maybe half a dozen or 8 or 10 people, and we'd put them through a training,
Mhm.
and we would spell out for them everything that they needed to know to be
Mhm.
able to do a good job when they were finally turned loose as a reservations agent. And that included teaching them about the company culture. So going to the next book, then, The Great Game of Business, the main message of that book was open book management.
Mhm.
You can get your team on board with wanting the same thing that you want, and in other words, having alignment with the goals of the company,
Yeah.
if you share all of your finances with them.
Yep.
Share the financial
Honest
statements.
transparency, man. That is so important. Open and honest transfer. You got to let them know where you're at. You cannot be
Yeah.
selfish as a business owner, because it is going to hurt you so much in the long run. People are going to be talking, word gets around. That kind of stuff travels really fast, especially if
Yeah.
now you're playing with people's lives, their bills, and what it is they want to be doing. Like, you cannot be messing around with that kind of stuff.
Right. So, and of course, we had a lot of young people working with us who didn't have a lot of business experience. So when we said, profit and loss statement or P&L, they was like, huh?
All
You know,
right.
they,
Right.
they didn't know. So we taught them. We had classes, and
Yes.
we went over the financials line by line and shared with them what all of these lines meant and
Mhm.
a balance sheet. And it worked,
Mhm.
because when they could see, oh, this is how you actually get to a profit. And then we made that profit meaningful for them by sharing it with them.
Yes.
So our line was, if the company wins, you win. And so when we did really well, we had big bonuses that were paid out, and then we had huge bonus parties where we would go out on the town and rent limousines and take them to the best restaurants. And, it was a big deal. In fact, one of them was, we took everybody to Las Vegas for the night. So,
Well, there we go. All right. So the thing is too, when it comes to your service, because I'm thinking back now to about 3 years ago, but then actually about close to 4 years ago now, I took my first cruise. I took my first ever cruise, and I booked it through, I didn't know what I was doing. I booked it through a travel agent, and she was telling me I wanted to get the best deal, and she hooked it up to where, again, this is gonna have meals here. I was like really wet behind the ears. But the next 3 years, yeah, the next 3 years, I've been able to book my own cruise with the automated system that you're referring to. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering now that when you guys made the sale to, it was Alaska Airlines, right? How was that transition? Like, what was the transition like? Was it, you guys just made the sale and let it go, or were you guys able to now teach certain employees, hey, this is what you're going to need to do to stay? Because now I'm thinking that that lady that I called to book my first cruise, now there's really going to be no need for her because I learned how to do it myself at this point. I can go online and say, look, search by price, low, high, and I know pretty much everything. And how do you build a career on that? So, I'll let you kind of speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, Alaska Airlines didn't want to operate Hawaiian vacations. They wanted us to go away.
They paid it. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
They took, I mean, the transition period spanned several months because there was a lot that went into it. And in fact, we ended up operating for another couple of months because they couldn't handle all of our volume all at
Oh,
once.
okay. Oh, man.
So it was kind of complicated. But when we anticipated the transition, we thought, here we are with all this staff, and we've got the computerized reservation system, we've got the building and the infrastructure. Um, do we just close the doors and sell all of it or what? And we thought we'd really like to keep our ohana together. And Hawaiian family is ohana,
Mhm.
and our team was our ohana. And so we thought, like, how can we utilize all of this in another way that wouldn't be competitive with the Alaska Airlines, service to Hawaii?
Mhm.
And so we thought about getting some small cruise ships because my family was in the small cruise ship business for many years. And
Mhm.
yet there was a way that we wanted people to be able to see Alaska from a cruise ship
Oh,
that was
okay.
different
There you go.
because we have had our own boat in Alaska for many, many years, and we didn't go just from like town to town. We
Mhm.
would go out into nature and put the anchor down in a quiet little bay and kayak around, or go ashore and hike. And we
Yeah,
thought, oh,
that would
this
be,
is the way
yeah,
that
that's amazing. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, this is the way that people really need to see
Mhm.
Alaska, rather than just going to the towns that are full of souvenir shops and so forth.
Right.
And so my family's business wasn't interested in doing that kind of operation. So I thought, well, there's a couple of cruise ships that are tied up at a dock in Seattle. They've been bank owned for a few years because that company that owned them was
Mhm.
bankrupt. So we tried to buy them,
Mhm.
and we got the deal accepted. But then we had due diligence done, and it turned out that the steel hulls needed a lot of work because they had degraded and they were not thick enough. And
Mhm.
so we needed to do more work on them. We went back to the bank and said, we need to lower the price to be able to cover the cost of this additional steel work. And the
Yeah.
bank said no. So we went, oh, okay, well, enjoy holding them for another however.
Mhm. Right.
And so we walked away and then, shut the whole operation down. We helped our people get new jobs. We gave them,
Wow.
nice,
There you
nice
go.
exit packages
Yeah.
and took care of them. Um, but a couple of years later, another bank who had taken, because that bank who said no went
Mhm.
under. So another bank took over the assets and came to us and said, do you still want those two boats? And we said, well, no, not now, because
No, it's too late. You're already kind of moved.
yeah. But we knew of a friend who had a company who had smaller boats, because we're talking really small cruise ships, less than 100 passengers.
Right.
And this other company was operating even smaller boats. I think their biggest was 36 passengers. We said, would you like a couple more ships to operate? And they said, yeah. So we made a deal where they would operate them and market them and all of that. And all we had to do was buy them and fix them up, get them ready for passengers because they'd gotten into really bad shape just sitting at the
Yeah.
dock for years.
Yeah.
So we did that.
Mhm.
And then another cruise line went under, and we were able to buy those assets from a bank who held the collateral. And then we ended up with five small cruise ships, all under 100 passengers, and
Yeah.
all leased to this cruise operator who did all the work for us. And we just, paid
Yeah.
the money to give them the ships in good shape.
Yeah.
And that went on for about 10 years.
Yeah, and
So
well, I'm glad you brought that up because that kind of leads into the work you're doing now in regards to maybe the online stuff that you're teaching and the learning teaching business owners how to actually systematize their business and what to do. So I'll let you explain it a little bit in terms of how you service people now, the business owners now that may be interested or maybe listening and would be interested in working with you. What's the process in terms of working with you and then serving them?
well, I have a very simple way to work with me, which is to buy my online course.
Yeah,
I
that was
created I
online.
created a course because I am at a point in my life where living the dream is very important to me. And living the dream means traveling. We just got back from 6 weeks in Europe, and we just don't want to
Man,
give
that
up.
sounds good. Yes.
So I don't want to be tied to a set schedule of working one-on-one with clients,
All right.
but I do feel that I've got a tremendous amount of experience and hopefully wisdom to share with people. And so I felt that being able to do one to many was the best way to do that, because one of the things I teach is leverage, and leverage is doing one to many versus one-on-one. So I developed an 8-module course
Mhm.
that basically encapsulates all the things that I feel were the most important aspects of our success.
Mhm.
And it's 6 essential secrets to business success. And there are 6 pillars, six principles.
Right.
And the 8 modules outline all of those, plus an opening and a closing. So that makes the 8.
Mhm.
And the course is available anytime anybody wants to take it, because I'm not going to be delivering it live because, again, I'm going to be traveling.
You're
And
gonna you're living the dream, folks.
I am living the
That's
dream.
what you're living and doing what
Yeah,
she's actually
that's
doing.
why my
Right.
business is Ral West, living the dream.
Yes.
So I want to share with
Mhm.
people how can you live the dream? How can you have businesses? Because we still have several businesses that we're running. People ask us if we're retired, and we're like,
Mhm.
no, not really,
Yeah.
but we're not tied down. We don't have a job,
Right.
and we don't have any kind of 9 to 5 thing. And during our 6 weeks in Europe, I was still, checking in and doing a little bit every day, but not much. It didn't get in the way of my vacation.
Yes.
And so the course outlines all of these important principles, which is leverage and tracking your data, getting your measurements, and your KPIs, developing your systems,
Mhm.
and working on your team, developing your corporate culture,
Mhm.
figuring out how to deliver world-class customer service, which requires systems to do that.
Yeah.
So all of these things are part of the course, and it's basically a formula or a framework, if you will, for having a really successful business that you can work on instead of in, and you can still have the life that you want, whatever that looks like to you. Maybe it's not traveling the world like it is for me, but if it's, being able to go camping, or being able to um, just spend more time with volunteer activities, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I want to make sure we're clear too for anyone that's listening. This is across all industries. You don't have
Yeah.
to be in travel and, okay, because I'm not now. I want you guys making sure you understand this is something she said, principles, KPIs, customer service. That is a span of all the industries out there. So it's important that you really do take into consideration that I need a system because a lot of times what I've learned is people can get so attached to a certain industry, they can get so attached to a certain like service per se. Like myself, I even have to catch myself being too attached to the football world and the sports world because I love it so much. When I realize, hey, I got to step back. There's a systems to how the business actually works. So that's very important to mention as well. So,
Right. And going back to our big pivot from operating a charter airline business really to operating small cruise ships. Different industries, kind of both in tourism, but really it was totally different.
Mhm.
And yet the principles applied. And then when COVID hit and the cruise ship business was like
Yep.
hit a really
It was, I
hit
had like, 'cause I remember as a trainer that there were several people that worked on cruise ships. This is South Florida, so there's a lot of them
yeah,
installed. So it was like it hit in a different way out here.
you bet, you bet. Alaska has derived a lot of its economy from tourism from cruise ships too.
Yep,
So it
exactly.
was devastating.
Mhm.
So we pivoted away from cruise ships, sold all the ships to the operator who did survive COVID, thankfully. Um, but so then it was like, okay, now what? What's the next pivot?
Yeah.
And we pivoted into multifamily real estate. I guess, taking another page from
There you
Robert
go.
Kiyosaki's book.
There you go.
And
And I think that's why the book gets so much love for so many years. I read it when I was like literally I left football and I was just trying to figure out how to live a life without playing. And I can't even remember who record it or how I got into my hands, but I realized, man, that makes sense. That it related to it doesn't matter what the and so many people who have been on the show have talked about it the same way. It really doesn't matter where you are, assets and liabilities, boom. Let's run with that and figure out how you can create assets in your business, put your money in assets, and don't have so many liabilities. And he made it
and
that simple.
passive income and
And
cash flow.
like, like that simple. And it's crazy
Yeah.
because so many people think, and speaking for myself, I had just graduated from university. And at that point, you think you know everything. And now I pick up a book and it's like, what? Wait, this wasn't in the curriculum. What? Am I? You
Yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like you had
And
to actually go and seek it.
isn't that a shame?
Yeah.
They need to have people teaching who've actually done it, so,
Telling you, man. But I
yeah.
would keep you off for another hour if we were to start that conversation. You want to be respectful of your time. Can you tell people how they can get in touch? What's the best way to get in touch and all that? I know LinkedIn, you're pretty happy, but any other ways?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's easy. My website is ralwest.com. So RALWEST.com. And there's information there about the course. I have a free webinar that
Mhm.
you can take to just get an introduction to some of these principles and what I teach and how I teach it. And I just really encourage everybody to recognize that it is possible. It is possible to have a successful business that you can scale and grow and sell if you want to
Yes.
or not, and still have the kind of life that you want to have. But you need to have the systems. You need to develop all of these, leverage tools and team and all of that. And so learn how to do it. It's not that tricky, but you just need to have it spelled out for you.
It's not tricky, but it is not easy, which is what I want to make not
Yeah.
easy.
It yeah, it takes
You
some it
you
takes
have to,
time.
yeah, you have to love it. You have to love what it is you're serving people. I mean, I go back to your point about you were about to quit, but you said the people need that trip from Alaska to Hawaii, and you thought
Yeah.
about them. You didn't think about yourselves. You and your husband didn't think about yourself and say, "What's going to help me now?" You said those people are going to love going from Alaska to Hawaii. And that's what made it say, hey, let's get this done. So it was more of a
Yeah.
selfless thing. And I hate how too often do business owners get looked at like we're selfish people, or like we're all about self. But as you guys can see, we're debunking that myth. If you want to be in business, you have to be very selfless. You have to really, really care about what you're offering people because I think that was incredible that you had mentioned that. Hey, these people from Alaska, the why, something as simple, we're going to keep
Yeah.
building.
Yeah, and actually that's the reason I started this Ral West Livin the Dream is that my daughters, actually I have two daughters,
Mhm.
and they said, Mom, everybody wants to do what you're doing, operating businesses and yet still traveling the world and having this
Yeah,
great life. And
you're right.
why don't you teach them? I thought, well, it's I should because I need to give back
Yeah.
because we're very, very fortunate and I'd love to help other people have the life of their dreams.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So the way I close out all the shows, Ral, is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back to, I'd say, what, 19, you were at 1981, I think you had mentioned. But it's you and your husband, you're having that difficult conversation. You're thinking about hanging it up. I want you to pretend that that version of you has come into the Zoom room. Give her some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
I think you need to believe that anything is possible. You need to believe in yourself. And I personally don't believe that there's such a thing as a dead end. We thought we were at a dead end, but we
Mhm.
weren't. We just needed to figure out a way to go over, under, around, through, and find the solution and don't give up. And it doesn't matter how old you are either. Keep going.
Yes, ma'am. And the mic officially drops with that one. All right. Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.